Hello, welcome back to this series of astrology basics. We are on part 3. So, my intentions here are to help you understand the chart from the perspective of it being a self-development tool, understanding that it is your blueprint to your life and why you're here, what your chart says about you, and all of the houses. So in part 1, I went over the first 6 houses and I spoke about the season it represents, as well as the yin and yang, the characteristics of each zodiac sign, and the ruling planet. And in the second, I did the houses from 7 to 12. So you kind of have a basics of understanding the houses, what they represent, the zodiac signs, natural ruler in those houses, and the natural ruling planets. So I have often said in those videos that your house, the houses, are where you are being affected in your chart and what is happening in the transitions to date. So that is where things are happening. And then the planets are the what. What is happening in that house? So it's the energy of that planet. And then the zodiac is the how it is happening. And so that is the characteristics of the zodiac sign that helps you understand where the placement is in your chart. So let's just talk about the planets briefly so that you can remember them from, an easier, like a cheat sheet, so to speak. So let's just go with Aries. I'll start with Aries and then move around the chart on what is the what for the planet. So Aries' natural ruler is Mars, and Mars is the planet of I act. So when you think of Mars, think of I act. Taurus' natural ruling planet is Venus. When you think of Venus, think of I love. Venus is I love. And then when you think of the third house natural ruling planet is Mercury. So when you think of Mercury, you think I communicate. So for instance, wherever Mercury is at in your chart, it will be about communication. And that could be social media, it could be writing, it could be an email, it could be speaking to somebody one-on-one. It is a form of communication, is what Mercury represents. So that's why when we talk about Mercury being in retrograde, that a lot of things happen with electronics, because electronics are a form of communication. Okay, so the fourth house's natural ruling luminary is the moon. And so when you think of the moon, think of I feel. The moon is I feel. So when you think of the moon makes you emotional depending on where it's at. But full moons make you emotional. That's why they call a full moon, they'll say the lunatics are out, because luna means moon and it affects you emotionally. So just think of the moon as I feel. And then we're moving on to the fifth house natural ruler is Leo, and Leo's luminary is the sun. So when you think of the sun, think of I am. It is your solar plexus energy. It is who you are. So it's your I am. So then moving on to Virgo. Virgo happens to be ruled by Mercury as well. So we know that Mercury is I communicate. But because Virgo's natural ruling house is health, it's how you communicate in the health realm. So we're going to also go into Libra, and Libra is ruled by Venus as well. So Libra and Venus, you think Venus, I love. Now we're moving on to Scorpio. Scorpio's natural ruling planet is Pluto. So when you think of Pluto, think of I transform. I transform. And so when we move on to the ninth house, the natural ruling planet of the ninth house is Jupiter. And Jupiter is I expand. I expand. So any placement that Jupiter is in, like as I'm recording this, Jupiter is in the house of Taurus, it is expanding the material world. We're seeing the world differently from our material beliefs. It's expanding the vision of it. It's right, it is opening our eyes to how we think around money and the material world. And then we're moving on to the 10th house, which the natural ruler is Capricorn, and Capricorn's natural ruling planet is Saturn, and Saturn is the planet of I achieve. So wherever Saturn is in your placement in your natal chart, that's where you have the strongest pull to achieve something. It is also your father energy, just like the moon in the 4th house. The luminary is your mother energy. It's I feel, because it's your masculine and feminine. Saturn represents the masculine and the moon represents the feminine. So Capricorn, think of Saturn. Saturn is the planet of I achieve. Then we move on to Aquarius, and the natural ruling planet of Aquarius is I change. Now it's different from I transform. Change is transformation is a personal thing. You transform. It is change, but it isn't like the change of, let's say, technology, how technology changes over time, where transformation is an extension of who you are and you transform, like a metamorphosis. So when you think of Uranus, think I change. So wherever Uranus is in your birth chart, that is where you change, where you're dealing with change, where you see the most change. And then we go to the 12th house. The final placement is Neptune, is the ruling planet of Pisces. And so when you think of Neptune, think of I dream. I dream. So whenever you look at your natal chart and you see those placements and you remember the shortcut of what the planets mean, it'll give you a visual of how you're being affected in those houses. Now remember, a house is a wheel, and each wheel has a sliver like a pie, and each sliver represents the 12 houses. And you are going through the cycle, because everything is cyclical. You're going through the cycle and you are going through an evolution. So every time you go through an evolution, you learn more about yourself. So in your chart, you will also see that there are degrees. So the smaller the degree, the more immature the energy. The higher the degree, the more mature the energy. So that might kind of tell you like where you're going to learn those lessons, your deeper lessons, at what age. Also, when you look at your chart, you're going to want to look at what placement you have. So let's say, for instance, we know that the natural ruler of the first house is Aries, okay? But maybe your ascendant sign is not Aries, like mine is Aquarius. So you're going to want to look at where you have Aries in your chart that would affect your first house, because it's the natural ruler. So whatever house Aries is in, you will also feel that. So for instance, I am an Aquarius rising. So because I'm an Aquarius rising, my Aries is in the 3rd house. And the 3rd house is the house of I communicate. So part of my of my personality is how I communicate, how people see me as a communicator, because Aries is ruling my third house. So I hope this helps you be able to combine the houses. And then if you have a planet in that house, that what characteristic is also going to affect your house. So for instance, in my first house, I have Saturn, and then I also have parts of fortune in my third house of communication. So parts of fortune is your pot of gold. It's your pot of gold. So when all of your sun, moon, and rising in your signs, it's like when they meet up, it creates this pot of gold. It's like X marks the spot. So I happen to have it in Aries in the third house. So I'm an entrepreneur. Aries energy is very entrepreneurial, but it's an entrepreneur in the way that I communicate, whether I'm writing a blog, I'm making this video, I've written a book, a podcast, social media, one-to-one relationships as well. But it's the way that I communicate. It's my parts of fortune. But when I look at my first house and to see how I'm being affected, because remember, you're self-developing through this. You're learning about yourself. In my first house, I'm an Aquarius, but also, and I don't want to get confusing, because when whole house readings are the easiest for you, but there is the Placidus chart, which there's a lot of houses that are in a cusp. So that's where it gets confusing. So I'm going to just focus on whole house. I'm not going to go into reading your chart that way. So if I do go whole house, then my Saturn and my Chiron moves into the second house, so I'm not as affected by it. But if I go the other way, I am affected by those charts. Either way, your self-confidence is tied up in your self-worth. So that's how I combine the two of them. So when we think of the houses, the first house is about your self-esteem, your self-confidence, your personality. Your second house is your self-worth. Your third house is the way that you communicate. Your fourth house is how you're comfortable in your own skin, okay? Because it is the ruling of the home, but your body is your first home. So being comfortable in your own skin, how you feel in your body. And then we have the fifth house, which is the house of self-expression, how you express yourself. The sixth house is how you take care of your health, but it's also your daily habits, your habitual things that you have on repeat, your beliefs, and in those programmings of those habits. And then your seventh house is your relationship, but it's how you relate to yourself, what kind of relationship you have with yourself. The eighth house is how you deal with other people's money and how you feel your sexuality, about your sexuality, not about having with other people. It's all about your inner power. It's who you are. And so when you go into the ninth house is about, your philosophy. What are your beliefs? How you see the world? What is your perception? And then we go into the 10th house, which is your public reputation. How do you want people to see you? How do you want to be perceived by the world? And then we go into the 11th house. The 11th house is about how your friendships, how you want to be a friend and be a part of humanity. And so it's how you're a friend to yourself. First, you've got to be a good friend to yourself in order to excel in the outer realms. And then when we go into the 12th house is spirituality. So we're starting to learn now, and it's taken a while, but we're starting to learn that you cannot just be in the physical. You have to have some kind of spiritual practice to create the balance, because it's the yin and the yang. So it is, how do I have a spiritual relationship? What do I do? How do I communicate or visualize? Because the planet is Neptune energy. So what are the illusions you're under? What are your belief systems you're under when it comes to spirituality? How do you imagine spirituality? When you visualize it, what does it look like to you? And so when you master all of those, you start to learn about your avatar. Your avatar is telling you how you want to participate in the world. It's also, I just had to look for a second. I thought I wasn't recording, so I just go, oh my gosh. But anyway, so it's the relationship you have with yourself is always going to be the most important. And that's what you have to learn, because it is your birth chart, your blueprint. So when you're playing a game of life, this is telling you, when you picked your character, you picked your avatar, and these are the characteristics. This is the challenge that you want it to face. These are the lessons you want it to learn. This is where you want it to feel more connected, where you felt more in sync. And in your chart, you will see aspects. And the aspects are those funny little symbols of a square and a triangle and something that looks like a star, which is a sextile, or you'll have a conjunction, or you'll have an opposition. So when you think of that, it's like squares are hard. You're learning lessons, but it's to keep it's what's putting you into a box is how I like to look at squares. So it's like, what lessons do you have that's putting you in a box? Where triangles are more favorable, because you have the balance of two other zodiac signs that are in harmony together. And in opposition is just what it is. Whatever sign you have in opposition there's a learning lesson there for you. Where you have a conjunction, where you have signs that are next to you, you complement them. And so it's more of a comfortable state, because all of those signs that are conjunct together are in harmony. And then when we think of oppositions, conjunctions, trines, sextiles, those are like the basics that I want to stay with you. But that's where, when you look at your chart, when you do the printout and you see the actual wheel, but if you go to print it on astroseek.com, when you go to print it, you will see a chart with all of those symbols under there. And those symbols are what tell you about those lessons, those oppositions, where you're growing, where you're in harmony, what you've already known. Now I'm going to go into your south node and your north node. So your north node is what you're mastering. It's your purpose in life, but it's not just the north node, because you're all of your sign. You have all zodiacs in your chart, and you're part of all of them. So your north node will also be a accumulation of your rising sign, your sun sign, where you have placements in the chart. But for the easiest way to look at it would just to focus on your north. But if you want more of a in-depth reading, then you would look at the other placements. So your north node is something you didn't accomplish in a past life. And so in this lifetime, when you made the decision that you chose that avatar that you are, the avatar you chose was so that you could reach that North Star. Where your south node tells you a little bit about the character you were in a past life. So the way that my north node lines up, it's in the house of community and communication. So I know that I'm on track of what I wanted to experience in this lifetime. It took me a lot to get here. It took me a lot to get comfortable in front of a camera. It took a lot for me to believe in myself that I had something that would be of interest that I could share with humanity. It took me a while to understand that I was even a writer, that I could write a book, because there was a block around that. But in my South Node, it shows that in a past life, more than likely I was, because I don't know the ins and outs of this, but it's been said that we reincarnate from the opposite sex that we are in this lifetime. So in a past life I was a man, in this lifetime I'm a woman, in my next lifetime I'll be a man. It rotates. So that's what makes me believe that in a past life I was a man, but I was a philosopher, and I think I taught either astrology, metaphysics, or philosophy. Did I say philosophy? Philosophy, metaphysics, astrology, also spirituality, and I have a huge resistance around religion. And so I think in my past life, I experienced something with religion, why I have such a bitterness around religion and the dogma behind it. But the thing is, I didn't bring it to community. So I think from the way my chart reads, it's like I was kind of like hiatus. I was full of myself. I was this philosopher, and I was very closed-minded, and I didn't share my beliefs with others. And so in this lifetime I'm supposed to be doing that, and so that's where I'm following this. And that's why I think it's so important that you know your natal chart, because things start to make sense. Like, I get a lot of, like, sometimes you're so serious, but I'm supposed to be more playful, because the Gemini energy is very witty, funny, playful. But in my South Node, I could be a little stuffy and serious and not approachable. But when you get to know me, because I'm a Libra moon, and Libra is natural ruling planet is Venus, you will see that I'm very nurturing. I also have that Cancer placement in the 6th house with Venus and Mars in harmony. So I have a healthy balance of how I serve with the masculine and feminine energy. So it's like, you'll get to know me, and then you'll realize that I'm not as serious as I come off as being initially, until you get to know me. So that's all I have for you today. Like I said, I want to keep this short. If you have any questions about what I covered, this is the one I didn't cover, and I knew that I was going to leave something out, and it's important. You need to remember this one, is your Chiron placement, and why it's so important to understand. I can't believe I almost forgot to put this in this video. The reason why you want to know where your Chiron placement is because it's your wounded warrior. It is something that you believe about yourself, that you've been taking with you from many past lives, that you're here to heal. It's this karmic energy. So wherever you have Chiron, it's showing you a belief that you have about yourself that is holding you back from moving forward in your game. It is the one thing that is kind of like the trickster in your life that holds you back. And so, for instance, for me, I have Chiron in my 2nd house of Pisces, and as we know, Pisces is the house of imagination, and so I very much think outside the box. And sometimes I've been accused of being a dreamer, which, yes, I am a dreamer. We're all dreamers. We want to create, but it came as a negative thing to me growing up as a child, and I was reprimanded in school about it. And because of that, I felt like I didn't fit in. And so if you're here, if you saw any of my other videos and you followed over, or you came over from one of my TikToks, you understand that that is the one thing that we have in common, is that we both felt that, where we didn't fit in, and the way that we think is different, and we love all the fantasy and the imagination. So you probably have, like me, well, not probably, you do have strong Neptune placements. And for me, it's in my talents. It is my skills, because that is the second house. It also is the house of your self-worth. It's the house of how you make your money. It is the house of your material world. So because of that, that's how people saw me in the material world. And my skill set is I'm a visionary, because I do see in pictures, and that's my talent. My talent is I can see things that have already happened before they have happened. But to speak that out into the world, you're I think we're getting there, where people are understanding that this is true. We all have psychic abilities, and you're not as crazy as you were thought back then. But back then, I was kind of like the odd child, and I learned how to go and become an introvert and hide. And even to the point where kids used to tease me and call me Casper, because that's my time. I'm going to date myself, but that's when Casper the Friendly Ghost was really popular. Even so much, my Halloween costume, I was Casper. I picked out Casper for myself because I felt safe about being invisible, because my environment felt very chaotic, and I had that Chiron placement where there were a lot of lessons for me to learn in that house, so I could get back to my self-worth and be okay with being the odd man, being okay to use my imagination, being okay to think about things differently. Just like me teaching you astrology, I'm teaching you different from how another person would teach astrology, but this is how I envision astrology. This is how intuitively I see astrology, as playing a game. Another thing is, this has come to me recently, and I want to share this with you, is that the Bible, the book, okay, there's a lot of astrological influence in the Bible, and I truly believe that it is your guidebook that goes with your chart. So just like when you're playing a board game and you don't understand the rules, right? You don't understand the play for play and what you're supposed to do and what's expected to, move along in the game. Well, I feel like the book is about evolution. It's about you evolving and being true to yourself. But your birth chart is like your board game. And so you picked your avatar, and now you want to learn how you're supposed to move through the game. Well, the book is your guide. Now, we know it's been rewritten, and from my research, the King James Version is, very hypocritical towards women. So you have to do your discernment. And also, it's very important that your perspective of the written word, it has to resonate with you. That's why you should always use your discernment. So we've learned to give our power away, and we've given somebody else the authority to teach us what their perspective is about what they're reading, but they're coming from their own perception. So it's how they've interpreted the word is how they're reading it. That's why it's so important for you to know your own interpretation. So when you get to know your game that you're playing and you understand there's a guidebook, you read the book as how it pertains to you. And because we're such intuitive beings, you will know that it pertains pertains to you because it feels good in your body. You're not going against it. There is no shame, no fear, and no guilt. And that is, you'll always know when you're out of alignment when you feel that way, okay? Now, this doesn't mean that you skew it, to try and form it into how you want it to perceive, but it is an intuitive. So as long as you're being integral with yourself, you're being honest with yourself when you do read. And I will tell you this, I am a very intuitive being, and I get downloads all the time. And I know that me teaching this to you, it came to me so quick, so I taught it in a past life. I'm teaching it differently because I think I was very pious, like I said, in a past life, and I didn't bring it to the people. I used all of the lingo and that kept people from understanding, kind of like, when you go into the hospital and they have all of this jargon and you don't understand, and even though they're telling you what's wrong with you, you don't know what's wrong with you. So that's what I'm talking about. So in this, and sometimes I struggle with that because sometimes I think I'm oversimplifying it. Because I think I'm still battling with that version of myself in a past life, and this belief that it has to be hard in order for you to receive it. But I will tell you this, the downloads that you receive will come in the most simplest formats, and you will resonate with them because it applies to ease instead of this inferiority belief about yourself, because everything that we receive, the information, is supposed to empower us. So that was long-winded for me to spin right back around to Chiron. But know that Chiron is important. If you see things that are happening in your life on repeat, you feel like you're stuck on a hamster wheel, it's because there's something where your Chiron placement is that you are not seeing. And so it can be easy to project out in the world of why you're dealing, like, I know, I was going to finish off, but let's just clear this up. In my second house where I have Chiron, it's about my self-worth. It's about the lessons I learned so I can step into my worth. I could have stayed there for a long time, and I did stay there for quite a while, because I was projecting it outwards. So I was saying, these people did this to me, and that's why I feel the way I do. This is how I grew up, and these were my parents, and that is why I feel the way that I do. But when you start to learn that everything is happening for you in the game so you can evolve quickly so that you can get to the next level, then you understand, this happened to me because it was moving me out of the belief that I didn't have value. So I could have stayed there in victim and keep repeating the cycle, being on the hamster wheel over and over again, or I can choose to take it as a learning lesson. And when I learn from it, and then I say, okay, that's not going to happen to me again because I learned that this is not the way I want to feel, that's when you've learned the lesson and history doesn't repeat itself. It's when you go in it blindly and you just want to project out into the world and you want to blame everyone for your circumstances. But remember this, you chose your avatar. You chose your birth chart. You chose how you wanted to play this game. You just forgot. You forgot that you had this natal chart. I don't want to say you forgot because I think they hid it from us. They've taken astrology away and made it some evil thing so you don't know about yourself, and they won't even admit that there's astrology in the Bible. But it is you. It's what you wanted to experience in this lifetime. Stop getting distracted and learn about you. And I'll see you on the next video.